expert and positive intelligence specialist. If you hear some noise in the background, it's raining outside. So you might hear the trickle of the rain. So never mind that. It's beautiful and sunny in my heart. So why I call this show It's All Good, it's because I feel that life is absolutely amazing. And whatever happened in your life, there's always a silver lining. There's always something that is good about any situation. And it's also because of my favorite my cup, It's All Good. And because I realize over time that things that happened in the past, even if it's just 5 seconds ago, I can't change it. If something happened, if I drop a cup of tea, or if I break a plate or whatever that is, if I do my dishes, I break something, like it's past. I can't change it. I can't go back and relive that event and make it different. So I learned to say, hey, it's all good. The cup's broken. It's all good. I can't fix it. And if I can, like if I ever break that cup, I'll glue it because I love that cup. And but what can I do? I'll look at the way I can fix it. I look at the way I can put it together. I look at the way I can see the situation. So things of the past, whether it's 10 years ago, 50 years ago, or just 5 seconds ago, my philosophy is to learn to accept it and look at what's good into that. And how can I move forward either by learning about the experience. Sometimes you can't change it. I mean, not change it, but you don't find anything good about it. Well, it's an experience that I've learned something. That's good. You've learned not to do something one way. It's something that you could be curious about, well, how can that move forward? And I learned something. It's something you could have empathy towards, right? Let's say something really bad happened. Well, give yourself empathy, give yourself compassion. So as you move forward, also, if you look at the future, when you try to plan the future and forecast conversation, I've known a lot of people that are talking in the future. They're going to talk to their boss about a situation, and then they're already running the conversation in their mind. They already know how that's going to end. But in reality, they don't, right? They just say, oh, I got to be ready for every situation. But that might not be the case. They might not know exactly how things going to happen. You can plan, you can organize. If you go on a trip, yes, you have to know what you put in your suitcase. You have to prepare for a car, accommodation, place to buy your food, perhaps. Like, just organize. But you can't plan the whole future. And you have to be ready whenever eventuality happen that you had not planned, to move in that direction and say, hey, it's all good, and move on and deal with those situations. So that's why I call this show It's All Good. And that's my way of thinking and seeing life. So I do this show weekly, and I would like to encourage you to follow me on YouTube at youtube.com/ at Denise Belil. And you can subscribe to my channel. And this way you can be notified every time I have a show. And also, if you would like to be on my show, or if you want to talk with me about my way of thinking and seeing that maybe I can support you and move you forward in your life, book a call with me. It's tiny.cc/talk with Denise. And I would be happy to have you having a conversation, or have you on my show if you think we're a fit. So my fabulous guest today is Ghulam Fernandes, and she's a grief specialist. And I think that it's important in our life to grief is something we can't escape. Like, we lose a person or even a pet. I lost my pet 2 years ago, and it's difficult. It's difficult once you live, like I've lived with that pet for 15 years in my life, every day, all day long, because I work from home. So it was part of my life constantly. Or a person, a parent, a child, a husband, a brother, a sister, a neighbor. We all go to grief. We all have these loss in our life. And that's why Ghulam is here, because she's a specialist. And we'll talk about how to handle grief and how to move in a direction that, hey, it goes back to what I'm saying, it's all good. find a gift into that situation and how to move forward. So let's welcome Ghulam to the floor. So welcome, Ghulam. It's so good to have you here.
Thank you so much, Denise. It's such a pleasure to be here.
It's such a pleasure to have you because we've been introduced through a guest that I've had a couple times in the past. And it brings me amazing people. So you got to talk to Denise, you got to talk to Ghulam. And so I'm glad that I found you and you're here. So tell me a little bit more about, first of all, where you're from, what you do, and because I don't think you're in Canada like I am, so so let give me a little bit overview of who you are, and then we'll go in a little bit more depth into the questions.
So I live in Southeast London in the UK,
Mm.
and I'm married with two amazing sons. And recently, I've become a grandmother. Um,
Congratulations.
so that's just a little bit about me. What else would you like to
The
know?
beauty of being a grandparents is that you still have responsibilities at times, especially if they're close, but then you give them back. As opposed to when it's your own kids, it's like,
Yes,
okay, they're still there the next day crying.
yes. No, that is
you
the
can
beauty.
you can
I
spoil
think,
them and send them back. Sorry,
yeah,
we had ice cream all day.
she's very tiny at the moment. I'm
Yeah,
looking
yeah,
forward
yeah.
to the one we
Imagine,
will have
yes,
later. But no,
yeah,
it's
that will
definitely
come.
a relief to say, I think she needs mummy.
Yes,
You go.
absolutely.
But she's gorgeous.
Oh, wonderful. So now you work as a grief specialist. And what led you into that work? Like, I'm sure you haven't been a grief specialist since the beginning of your career. So what brought you to become a grief specialist?
The short version is I had multiple losses when I was growing up. And it started with losing my mum when I was 13 years old.
Hmm.
I'd never heard anybody talk about grief or how you handle it
Yeah.
or what works or doesn't work. And so when somebody tried being helpful and just saying to me, oh, you mustn't cry, you've got to be strong, I just took it on board. And I spent years, every time I wanted to cry, I'd
Holding it
tell
in.
myself, I mustn't cry, I've got to be strong. And so my grief sat there for years. And
Yeah.
then when I was around 30, my older brother died very suddenly from a massive heart attack. And so all the unresolved grief from my mum's death then came up, as well as the grief from losing my brother so suddenly. And then on top of that, I suddenly became really aware of my own mortality
Hmm.
and very fearful about death and dying because I used to think old people died and other people died, and all of a sudden it wasn't old people. As I said, he was only a year and a half older than me,
Yeah.
and it wasn't other people. So that led me on a whole quest to try and make sense of grief and how to move forward. I tried so many things, and there's a whole. In fact, Keith has got me to detail that part of my journey, but that's why when I finally came through it after a lot of pain, I felt, I don't want other people to suffer in the way that I did. That I would love to be able to train myself so I can pass on the right knowledge, tools, and processes that can help them to move forward and get their life back. I also learned on my training, I used to think that grief was just about bereavement, but
It
I
was
learned
just about what? Sorry.
bereavement, people dying.
Okay. Okay.
It's a commonly held belief that
Okay.
grief is to do with,
Yeah, with people dying. Yeah.
that's right. But I learned on my training that actually um, grief is more than that, that every time something comes to an end or there's a
Mhm.
significant
Yeah.
change in a
Yeah.
behavior, familiar pattern of behaving, that can produce, that there are over 40 life events that can produce feelings of loss and grief.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And I also learned that not only is grief and its impact negative if it's not resolved, but it's cumulative. So if you have the habit of suppressing your emotions or just pushing it into, somewhere, life just gets heavier and heavier as you drag these things along.
Yeah.
Then it can get to a point where it doesn't take much to send you over the edge. And sadly, that's kind of what happened to me. There was all the unresolved grief of my
Mm.
brother, my mother, and then I hadn't realized all the other things. Changing locations from one continent to another when we moved to the UK. All the little romantic heartbreaks that you
Yeah.
experience
Of
when you're
course. Of
younger,
course.
and
It all builds up.
absolutely. And so I actually got to a point where the burden just became too heavy.
Yeah.
Excuse me. And I took time out. I decided to resign from my job. I decided to go traveling and try and make sense of those big questions of life. And eventually, when I found my peace, I thought, right, I'm now passionate about helping those who are struggling
Yeah.
and looking for ways to move forward and get their life back.
Yeah, that's so important. And I love one point that you said that I'd like to emphasize on is that grief can come in many different directions, right? Like the heartbreak, you could breathe. Like some people are as sad at a breakup as if the person
Mhm.
had died,
Yeah.
right? Because they know it's finite, right? There's
Yes.
no going back. And when
Yeah.
somebody died, that there's no going back,
Yes.
or losing a job or moving, as you mentioned, right? Like these are defined like finite events that
Mm.
is just as troubling as the loss of a person, right?
Yes. And sometimes people think that there's like a hierarchy, like, oh, it must be so much worse for you because you've lost a child. I've only lost a pet. But as you said, if that pet has been part of your life every day for 15 years, it's almost, and maybe your child, you had a terrible relationship. They were
And
very
you
abusive
see
and
them,
everything else.
yeah.
And
Like the
maybe they
time,
didn't
that's what I
even
was
have a country.
comparing. Actually, you're right, because
Yeah.
when I'm thinking of my cat, now his brother is still with me 2 years later, like he's 17 now. But these I worked from home, so these two cats, they're with me pretty much 24/7. Of course, I go out for groceries, I go out to see friends here and there, but most of the time we're together, right?
Yeah.
And pets are needy of their masters, even though people say that cats are independent, but not really.
I think
They
sometimes the masters are more needy of their cats,
yeah,
so
yeah.
they
So
become very dependent on that comfort that they
yeah,
provide.
yeah.
Yeah.
And your children, you spend, at night they sleep. Okay, you're not with them. They don't come and sleep with you like the pets do. And during the day they go to school or they out of the house, so you're not with them. So you see less of your children than you see of your pet if you work from home. So that's why I agree with including pets, and
Mm.
people will confide in their pets, even though the pets don't reply, right? But they have them as a
Mm.
companion to talk with them, to have them in their arm and cry, whatever, right?
Mm.
Like the joy, the sadness. So I totally agree. And it's not just human, it's
I think the key point there is to understand that grief and the grief journey is a unique
yeah,
experience.
yeah,
So any kind of comparisons, or you should do this or you shouldn't do that, or you should cry or you shouldn't cry,
yeah.
it's really
Everybody's
unhelpful.
different. Yeah,
So accepting that your journey is unique to you is really important part of the healing process. Otherwise, you spend your time trying to please other people and do it right. There's no
yeah,
right or wrong way to grieve.
yeah.
And becoming aware of your own uniqueness and what helps you and what hinders you is really important, because everybody's going to have their own opinion. And if
Hmm.
you try and listen to this one and that one, sometimes people are really well meaning, but unintentionally, they can actually say very unhelpful things,
Yeah.
as in
So
my case. Yeah.
how would you define grief? When do someone know that whatever they're experiencing, it is grief?
So, as I said, how we define grief is the emotions, the conflicted feelings that you get when something has come to an end, and or when there's a significant change in behavior. And it's recognizing that you're having conflicted feelings, that you've lost your sense of peace. and it can manifest itself and impact you physically,
Yeah.
mentally, spiritually. Sometimes on the physical front, you might find yourself just feeling really fatigued, struggling to focus, struggling to make decisions, struggling to take care of yourself, your basic needs, not sleeping well, either eating too much or sleeping too much or not enough. And it can also just manifest itself in physical format, because obviously, when you've got all these emotions rushing around your body, it can lead to headaches and stomach cramps. It can affect your blood
Hmm.
pressure.
Hmm.
And in terms of spiritually, depending on whatever faith you have or don't have, sometimes life can feel like, well, what's the point? If I'm just going to die, what's the point? And you can lose your sense of joy in the daily stuff. Somebody, I mean, one of my clients, I was talking to her today. She's coming to the end of the program, and she was explaining to me how when she came, it was as if she was looking at the world through like tinted glasses. So everything seemed dull and dark
Yeah.
and hopeless.
Yeah.
And to see her now, where she's actually, you can see that she's full of joy. She's refound her peace. She's managed to resolve the things that were really weighing her down. And that's another thing. You can just feel really weighed down, like there's a heavy weight.
Yeah.
Another client said it was as if he was walking around with like a dark cloud over him. He said, but when I looked at it, actually, it was like a big boulder. And he says, through this process, you've managed to break up that boulder. And then I've been able to remove it piece by piece from
Mm.
my heart. That's where his
Yeah.
boulder was weighing on him. So it's just fascinating listening to people as to how things have impacted them. And so I often say, my heart is to help people move forward after loss and get their life back, but also in that way to regain their peace, their productivity, their passion for life, and their purpose, so that they can focus on creating a life that's well lived. As you
Hmm.
said, we can't change the past, but we
Yeah.
can choose how we respond to it, how we
Yes.
learn from it, and how we move forward from it.
Yeah. A lot of what you describe when you describe grief and its symptoms sounds a lot like depression. So, do you feel that people that are going through grief are more susceptible to develop some type of depression as they live the grief?
I think it can work both ways. Sometimes people haven't realized that what is causing their depression is a whole stack of unresolved grief that's built up over time.
Yeah.
And so it it can work both ways, that because you're grieving, you're more prone to seeing the darker side of things and feeling down and your moods. And it can all cycle into each other, because if you're not sleeping, you're not eating, you're not taking care of yourself,
Hmm.
your physical health then impacts your mood, um, and vice versa. So, because of your mood, you're not doing your exercises or doing the other things, or you're just withdrawing into yourself. So, sometimes you just have to find a way to break that cycle. And so, I teach my clients something called the Grief Emotions Toolkit, where they start to become aware of the state that they're in and then notice how to manage that state and start to recognize that they're not at the mercy of their emotions. Their emotions can be a good source of information and be a friend. But if you see them as your master and they're running your life, then that's not going to be really helpful.
Mm-hmm. So, so how can people actually recognize that they need professional help? Because everybody grieves,
Yeah.
like the majority of people when they lose someone. Let's talk about death, for example, right? Like somebody lose someone, yes, they'll be grieving. And some people might grieve more than others or have a harder time than others. But how do you recognize that you need to seek help as opposed to just be like everybody else's that is having some grieving
So
problem?
I think it's understanding that there are two aspects to that question. The
Okay.
first is so that how you grieve is going to be impacted by how the loss happened, what kind of relationship you had, and whether there were things that you wish you had done better or differently or you done more of.
Mm-hmm.
If you have, that can be, there are three main causes of unresolved grief, and
Okay.
it's the problem is usually when you have unresolved grief that you get stuck. So the first example really, I could illustrate by sharing that my younger sister, after my brother died, sadly she had a delayed grief reaction, and she had a mental breakdown and she took her own life. So I was left thinking, well, what if I had done this? What if when I went traveling I'd taken her with me? What if I hadn't gone? What if this? What if
What
that?
could I have done different? Or
Yeah. So that can be, and then you become preoccupied with that, and then you can get stuck. The second one is when you've got some significant emotional communication that remains undelivered. So, an example of that was really when my mum died, just before they left for holiday. I had this sudden urge. I don't know where it came from because we were really happy they were going. We thought we could, have fun while they were away. But I had this sudden urge to tell her that I loved her and give her
Mhm.
a hug. But then this logical part of me popped up and said, don't make a fuss. She'll be back in 6 weeks because there are
Mhm.
lots of people who'd come to say goodbye.
Yeah.
So I held back. And
Okay.
so for years, that was where I was stuck because every time I thought of my mum, I was transported back to that particular
I
moment.
should have told her that I love her. I
Why
should
didn't
have.
I listen to my heart? Why didn't I, all that stuff?
Coulda, woulda, shoulda.
Yeah,
Right? Like all the.
absolutely. Absolutely. And then feeling like now you're carrying this important communication and there's no way
Yeah.
to communicate it. But that's not true, actually. There are processes that you can use that can help you to do that. The next one is really where you had hopes, dreams, and expectations, but which were dashed when something came to an end or there was a change. So, an example of that was I had three miscarriages,
Mm.
and I was pregnant with a baby girl twice. And because I have a husband and two sons, I was like, oh, I'm always outnumbered. And I was really excited that I was going to have somebody who could be on my side and I could do
Yeah. Yeah.
girly things with. We could go shopping, and I had all these fantasies.
About
But
having a daughter. Yeah.
yeah, but obviously, sadly, when I had the miscarriage, then those dreams, hopes, and expectations
Yeah.
came to an end. So that led to a lot of disappointment. So sometimes it can be a mixture of those three things that are
Hmm.
causing the pain, and sometimes it might be one that's predominant.
Yeah.
Because I realized that sadly, when my father died, just before he went on holiday, I remembered what happened last time. So I thought, I'm going to make sure I say everything. I tell him I love him. I bless him in whatever way I can, give him some spending money for his holiday because I was older by then. Uh, and I thought, if something happens to him, I don't want to have any regrets
Yeah.
about, I should have done this, I would have done that. So sadly, when we did get the news that he was sick, and then we got the news he was worse, and then we got the news that he had died, of course I was sad.
Hmm.
But it didn't have the same kind of feeling of getting stuck. It felt
Yeah.
more like a normal grief. So, going back to your question, depending on how the person died, what kind of relationship you had, whether there were unresolved issues, will determine whether you're getting stuck or whether you're moving forward. And it can be very emotional and whatever, but you're moving forward. So, in terms of some of the symptoms to recognize, if even after some time you're actually getting sort of prolonged and overwhelming sensations of sadness, and every time you think about the person you can't remember any of the good stuff, you kind
Hmm.
of back to having that conversation of why didn't I do this and that and the other. And if you notice that your sleep's being disrupted, you're struggling to focus and think. um, I mean, I remember with my younger brother, he was with my older brother when he collapsed and died, and it really traumatized him.
Yeah.
So he actually went into clinical depression. And
Okay.
I remember when he came out of it, he was able to explain. He said, I couldn't think enough to remember how to make a cup of tea. I'd go
Wow.
to make a cup of tea, and then I'd kind of get distracted with something. And he said it's like your thinking, your cognitive function gets impaired.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons why I think organizations need to understand much more about the hidden cost of grief,
Mm-hmm.
because that you're expected to carry on as normal after a few days off, but actually your decision making can be impaired and your thinking can be impaired. Your eating patterns, your sleeping
Mm-hmm.
patterns, your self-care. If you notice those things are happening, then that's a sign that maybe you need to get some professional help.
Okay. Okay. And thank you. That's very useful. And I love the fact that you elaborate on the different ways, right, that people can be affected and the different level of grief, depending of how close you were or far you are from the situation. And so how can, like, how do people, so let's say I realize that I'm not well. I need some support. And then I reach out to you, right? Like somebody tell me, oh, you got to talk to Ghulam. She's awesome. She's helping people with grief and all that. So then what happened?
Well, I have a number of free guides. I've got one
Hmm.
called the 10 common mistakes when handling your grief.
Yeah.
So I would send that out as a free gift that you can
Yeah.
actually read through. I have a free Facebook community that people can join. Just
Yeah.
they don't know me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it helps them to get to know a bit about who I am, what I do. And then when they feel ready, or if they've really been struggling and I got to have help now, I offer a free discovery call,
Okay.
which we can book for around half an hour usually. Some people need a
Mhm.
little more, a little less,
Yeah.
where I ask lots of questions to understand what's happened, why you've reached out, how it's impacting your life, how urgent is it for you to get help, what happens if you don't get it sorted,
Yeah.
what will happen if you do get it sorted. And then once I understand the situation, I think about, well, could we be a good fit to work together? Could you be a good fit for the program that I offer? And if you are a good fit, then we'll get you signed up and registered and so on. If I feel like, actually, no, this person needs something else that's going to be more helpful at this stage, then I will signpost them. So if we're not a good fit for whatever reason, I'll say,
Mhm.
okay, well, let me send you some free resources and let me send you a list of other
Other people that
organizations.
might be able to
I
support
had a
you.
lady who was dealing with grief, but when we talked, I realized that actually her more pressing need was that she'd been diagnosed as having ADHD, and that's not
Hmm.
something I specialize in.
Yeah.
So I said, although what I do could help you, maybe what you really need is to work with an ADHD specialist
Yeah.
and help you to get some routines and things in place. And if you're still struggling, come back to me and then we'll
Yeah.
do a brief. So my heart is really to help people who is transforming lives, really, because I know how much pain I was in and I didn't need to be. And I think the other thing is really I want to help people to have hope so they
Yeah.
can cope, because for a long time I didn't think I had a choice. I thought I'm going to spend the rest of my life feeling lost and confused and sad
Yeah.
and hoping it'll go away and hoping it'll get better. But
Yeah.
actually, with the right knowledge, tools, and processes, you can move forward and get your life back.
Hmm. Hmm. And what you've said about, if you feel that you're not the right fit for that person, you will send them to somebody you feel is. It shows a lot of integrity from your part, that you have at heart to really want to support the people that come to you, and that you want to give them the best help possible, even if it's from somebody else's. Right?
Absolutely.
And I think
Absolutely.
it's important for a professional to be able to do that, so that we're here for the people and not so much for our wallet, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the thing is, it's something I've learned, through time, because when I first started, I just thought I'm called to help everybody.
Hmm.
And so occasionally I did take on a client, not because I couldn't help them, but I hadn't, apart from thinking, do they need what I have? I didn't think about, are they a good values match?
Yeah.
Are we going to actually be able to work together? Will they be able to trust me to lead them through the process?
Yeah.
So I can think of one or two occasions where I didn't ask myself that question.
Yeah. Yeah. But when we start, it's
Got there,
understandable,
but it
right?
was hard, but it was really hard work. Whereas you get the right match and it's such a joy. It's
It
such
flows for the two of you, right? For
those
the clients and
exactly,
for you. And the
exactly,
connection is so strong that you
exactly.
you can read them, you can understand what they're going through, they can
Yes,
understand you better because they're fully aligned with what you can provide for them. So I think it makes a big
yes.
difference.
Yeah, so I'm very careful and choosy now about who I say yes to.
Yeah, which is good, which is good. And you have, I'm sure you have
Good
an
for me.
array of
Good for
people.
me. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, you can send people to other people too, which is
Absolutely.
great.
Yeah.
So if you could give us one piece of advice, what would it be?
Um, I think it would be just to remember you don't have to grieve alone because that's a
Mm,
very natural response to
yeah.
step back, withdraw, and actually that is really not helpful. And to educate yourself about what grief is, how it impacts you, and also particularly about some of the misinformation that's out there that sounds like common sense, but actually it's really unhelpful and can get you stuck. So I would encourage people to read my guide, check out the resources on my blog, and so on, because the more equipped you are, then the better you'll handle it. And also, the work that you do in helping people to have the right mindset and to build their resilience is really important.
Mm-hmm,
Because
mm-hmm.
life is going to happen. The only question is, are you going to be in a resilient, resourceful, and
Yeah,
aware space to handle it?
yeah. So that's how people can get your guide, the 10 common mistake when healing with grief,
Yes.
and also that can be found on your website, which and that's how
Yes.
people can reach you, right?
Yes. Absolutely.
So you can go onto handling-grief.com and you can find different ways to reach out with Gulan and get to know her a little bit more, and once you feel comfortable with who she is, and you saw today she's an amazing woman. She has a lot to share from her own unfortunate experience of grief, but that's often how we can the best help is those that have walked the path and those that have been through the experiences that we help people, right?
Absolutely.
So I mean, it's unfortunate that we had to be dragged down before we can rise up and help others. But that's what makes us the strongest because we walk the path, right?
Yes, I realized I had the choice of staying down or finding a way to turn my pain into my purpose.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's what I chose to do because the other wasn't going to get me anywhere.
Yes, of course, of
Yeah.
course. So yeah, I like what you've said also that people don't have to do it alone. There's help out there. You can reach out and if you and one thing that's important, and you kind of mentioned that, like if you reach out to someone and that person you don't feel right, don't be afraid to say, I
Mhm.
don't think you're with me. I'm going to keep looking. Right.
Yes. Yeah.
Because sometimes we feel like the guilt of, oh, well, but you gave me that free session
No,
and I don't, and then I say no, I feel guilty. I feel like I have
no.
to move forward. So don't feel like that. There are
No.
someone out there that can help you. You just have to look
Yes.
for them.
Yeah. And trust your heart.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I'm not saying that you have to be at your most comfortable because sometimes you need
Yeah.
somebody
You
to
need a little shaking
face
up.
the
Sure.
uncomfortable
Sure.
stuff, but there has to be a basic level of
Yeah.
trust
Yeah.
that somebody can guide you through and that they know what they're talking about and they can guide you to
Yeah.
get to the results that you want.
Absolutely.
Mm.
Well, that's fantastic. Well, thank you so much for this amazing time together. I'm sure you, just by what you've said, helped a lot of people. And if you've been watching live, please place comment, and if you watch the replay, please ask question, put comment in the chat so that we'll revisit that chat afterwards and then we can answer your question. And I'll put all the information of how to reach Ghulam into the comments and into the show note so you can reach out and know a little bit more about her. So I'll put you away for now and I'll bring you back. So don't go away. So thank you so much for listening to this amazing episode. And it's really important to, when you are grieving, when you are feeling that you're in the doom, the negative doom spirals, that you feel like your energy is draining, look for help. Don't do it alone. And you are not the only one that's going through that. Sometimes we feel that, oh, I'm all by myself, no one can understand what I'm going through. But little you know, a lot of people keep that inside also, and you feel like you're alone. But once you start sharing, once you start opening yourself up, maybe other people can guide you towards people that have helped them perhaps in the past, people that they know, people that have watched this episode and say, hey, I watched this episode and these gal are pretty cool. So don't be afraid to reach out, talk to other people whenever you feel sad, grief, depressed. We're here to help you. So again, I just want to say, if you want to know more about my interviews, all the other people I have interviews, you can go to my YouTube channel at youtube.com/at Denise Belil. Or if you want to have a conversation with me, just book a call with me at tiny.cc/talk with Denise. And I would be more than happy to have a talk with you. And I've interviewed so many people. I've met so many people that if I can't help you, I know someone that could. So until next time, be kind to one another. And I'm looking forward to talking with you later. Goodbye.